you navigate the second half of your life. Today's show is sponsored by Find Houston Senior Care, your one-stop shop for everything senior care and senior living in the greater Houston area. Visit findhoustonseniorcare.com today. And now, here's your host, Kathryn Watson. Welcome, everybody, back to the Life After 50 show. We had a little hiccup and missed a couple of weeks, but we are back on track, and I am starting off with a bang. I am here with Christine Thelker, and boy, does she have some good information to talk to you about. So Christine has just recently written a book. We're going to get to more of that later towards the end of the show. We're going to be talking more about her book. But her book title is For This I Am Grateful, Living with Dementia. And Christine has been diagnosed with dementia. In fact, she's been living with it for several years. So she's going to talk to us about her experiences, and we're going to learn from her so we can help ourselves and help other people who may have this diagnosis or may be thinking that they could have this diagnosis. Christine, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So I appreciate you getting up so early because you're over on the Pacific coast, right? You're up in Canada.
Yes, I am in Canada. I'm on the West Coast in British Columbia.
Great, great. So thank you for being here. Christine, I want to get started by going back in time. We're going to look back at when did you first start noticing that something wasn't quite right and maybe there was really a problem going on?
Well, looking back now, we can see that there was a problem that started probably at least a good four or 5 years, like noticeable events happening before I had a major event. So I would have small things happening, and, they were never sure why, there were all kinds of things. And then I had a TIA, or a small stroke, as most people know them, while I was working, which landed me in the hospital in an emergency room. And when I sort of came out of that, and it was quite a significant one. Of course, then I had to go through all the stroke clinics and all of those things, but there was still something wrong. Mm-hmm. And so then I started with a neurologist and having MRIs and different scans and different tests, and it went through a couple of years, really hard years, of trial medications for things like epilepsy and looking at MS, and they were kind of process of elimination because nobody wanted to look at dementia because of age.
Exactly. And, this happens a lot, Christine, unfortunately. I know with my mother-in-law, getting a diagnosis was like pulling teeth. It really was. We did not have a good experience with the medical community. And we're going to touch on that in just a minute, but I want to go back. You talk about events. For the listeners here, what do you mean by an event? What kinds of things were happening and what kinds of things should maybe people be paying attention to?
Well, it was little things like I would be midstream of a conversation, and then I would just sort of go what people would describe to me as vacant. Mm-hmm. It was like nothing there.
Yeah.
And then when that ended, and that could last just, a few seconds or minutes. And then when something sort of snapped back into place, I would be like, I wouldn't know what we were talking about or what we were doing right in that moment. Like, what are we supposed to be doing here? So I would lose that, from being there to there in that brief time. So those kinds of events started happening, and they put me into the emergency room on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
And on several occasions taken right from my desk at my job at the hospital into the ER.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was that those events were that noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you get, well, maybe you're under too much stress, and maybe it's this, and nobody really goes, I think there's something bigger going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all those little kinds of things. There was things like I would be walking across the floor, and all of a sudden it would be like this. I used to say it was like a switch, a light switch, that somebody just switched my body off, and I would just sort of misstep and lose, and then it's like somebody threw it back on, and oh yeah, right, and
Mm-hmm.
all these little types of things, and just struggling to keep myself focused and
Mm-hmm.
and be able to complete my tasks.
Christine, were you suspecting that dementia might be a problem?
There was no history of it in my family, but I worked in dementia care, so I had dementia training, and I took a lot of extra training. So I did have a discussion with my doctor, and I actually was living in another town. I had taken a position with the hospital in the next town, and I came back to my own doctor because I felt that's where I could get the best help navigating through it all. And we had that discussion early on, and we actually went through 4 different neurologists.
Wow.
Because they were taking us down all these other roads, and he wasn't happy with it, and I wasn't happy with it, until we finally got the doctor that would actually look at it for what we felt might be happening.
So it sounds like you had a good primary care doctor.
I did, and I still do.
That's wonderful.
I stay where I am.
Yeah.
Because I have him.
Mm-hmm.
There comes that point in your life where, yes, it would be nice to be closer to family and all those things, but it's so hard, to get doctors for most people, no matter what country you're in, it seems.
Right.
So if you have one, and you have one who is really dedicated and is willing to look outside the box and listen to you, you don't dare leave that.
Right. I agree. I very much agree. Yeah. That's to me, that's a rarity. I unfortunately have not had real good experience with the medical community with things. I think it's great. My mother-in-law did not have a good experience with her primary.
I'm not surprised. We hear that all the time from people. And, for me, I had neurologists just tell me point blank, well, there's no way, you're too young. People don't, and it's like, yes, they do get it young. No, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they don't have the education around dementia.
Right.
And a lot of them don't even have the interest.
Right.
Which is the hard truth.
Yeah.
So you have to find the one that does.
Yeah. That has that compassion and empathy and really wants to help. Yeah.
And that's exhausting work to find that piece and start building your team.
And that's, I'm glad you mentioned team, because I think that is important when you're dealing with any kind of health crisis, whether it's dementia or anything else. You need to have a team around you, a health team, a support team. You need to have a team of people. Like they say, it takes a village to care for someone, and that's so true.
And
so
like I have my GP, my primary doctor. I have an internist. I have a neurologist. I have a neuropsych doctor who deals in dementia. I have a physiotherapist, and they all work as a team. In fact, yesterday, after a big conversation with my doctor, he said, I want to talk to your physiotherapist, and we need to make another plan. So the team makes the plan, which I'm part of.
That's great. That's an amazing thing. I'm glad to hear that you have that. That's wonderful.
And people need to advocate for their loved ones. They need to advocate for themselves, whether it's dementia or any other illness. You have to be your own best advocate.
You have to, and you also have, it's helpful to have a family member or a friend that will advocate for you when you're unable to. Because sometimes when we're in the middle of a health crisis, whether it's dementia or something else, you're unable to communicate the way you need to and get the information across to the doctors and the other healthcare workers of what your needs are. So having someone, I know when my parents were aging and they had a lot of health issues, when they were in the hospital, we made sure somebody was there around the clock. There was always somebody there because we knew that in their weakened state, they may not be able to communicate their needs. And my mother was one of these people who she did not want to cross the doctor. The doctor was God as far as she was concerned, and she wasn't going to say anything that might upset him. I was the opposite. I was usually the one that they said, you go in there, because I would just tell them like it is. And I'd say, hey, wait a minute, this is going on and we need this and we need that. And, and you need somebody like that when you can't do it yourself.
And that's part of it. There is a big part of the population who everything the doctor said was basically like gospel. Right? Nobody questioned the doctor. But you have to question. And like my doctor and I have come to a point where we sit down and I have to write everything down now. I make an ongoing list for my next appointment, and we go through the list, and then we go back and forth about, I question him, he questions me, until we get to the place where, oh, you know what? Maybe we need to think about this. So, and that's advocating, and you have the right to advocate. That's the other thing. People think they don't have the right. You absolutely
do.
It's your body or your loved one. You have the right. You don't have to just accept whatever they're saying. It's why we went through 4 different neurologists.
Yeah. I think it's not only your right, I think it's your duty if you're helping somebody else, if you're the advocate for someone else. I think it's your duty to step up. And it's uncomfortable sometimes approaching the medical community. It can be very uncomfortable, but you need to do that. You need to step up and say, hey, wait a minute. I think as people, we know our bodies. We know what is working, what isn't working. We know when there's a problem. And, I always say our healthcare system is fabulous when it comes to an emergency. You needed the ER room and you've, been in a wreck or something like that, or a major event, they're fabulous. But long-term chronic illnesses, I think a lot of times our medical community, not always, but a lot of times they kind of slip on that. And dementia is definitely a long-term illness.
Yeah, and you really do have to make that decision when you're diagnosed to do and find out everything that you can do to help yourself.
Exactly.
It isn't, you can't go to the doctors and expect them to just make it better. With dementia, most times you're going to get told, well, I'm sorry, we have nothing for you. You have this many years to live.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was told I had 3 to 8 years. I'm in year 6 of that diagnosis. You know, I'm marching towards the 7th year. So holy, but you know, I didn't focus on that. I went, no, there has to be things I can do to help myself. So my doctor works hard with me because he knows how hard I work for myself and my well-being.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do.
So, Christine, what kind of testing was done to determine that it was vascular dementia? Because it used to be that they would say they can't do any testing until you've died, and then they can take apart your brain and see what happened, you know, but now there's some testing.
Still, truthfully, the only 100% way of knowing is at death and an autopsy. That is the only 100% for sure diagnosis. But now they do PET scans, they do MRIs. Now they understand a lot more. For example, at one time, if people had little white spots showing up on their brain scans, it was thought, oh, that's just normal part of aging. Well, no, that's not normal part of aging. They know now that those things are signs of things that they call silent strokes or white matter disease. And those are indicative of vascular issues a lot of the times. And from there, then they can start getting to that vascular diagnosis, because then they can start doing all the cognitive tests to line up with that. And then they start putting the pieces together before they give you the diagnosis. So you go through neurocognitive testing, and some of those are very simple tests. You can go through some that are very complex. You know, they're a full day of testing, and they're very complex. And then you do the MRIs and the PET scans and all of those things to go along with it. You know, I had a vascular specialist brought in as well to look at my whole vascular system, and so then they were able to piece it all together. So it gets quite complicated and complex. So it's really good if you have either a doctor like mine that will sit down and really explain that in more simplistic terms, what all those things do and mean and what the test results are actually saying. Or if you have a care partner who is able to help you decipher all of that and make sense of it all, because it's quite a complicated process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Christine, what has it been like since you were diagnosed? What happened when you got that diagnosis, and how have you progressed since then?
When I was first diagnosed, it was like being hit by a freight train. You know, you hit this wall and it's just devastating. You know, you have a career and you're working one day and the next life is over and somebody's telling you, you know, get your affairs in order. Lifespan is considered 3 to 8 years on average. And you're going, what? And then you go through the emotional upheaval. And a lot of people slip into depression. And I call it going into a numb phase, where you sort of go through the motions for months of doing what you have to do, but you're really not functioning in a proper manner because your brain is stuck in this with those words swirling around constantly. And it takes quite a while for that to lift. You go through the tears and the crying and the can't be right and all of these things and what am I supposed to do and I don't know what to do and it's quite a scary time, especially because there's so few answers.
Right.
Like the doctors don't have resources at their fingertips to hand you, which is something that I really advocate that they need to have. They need to have a toolkit that says you need to contact these organizations. They can offer you help that I can't. So for me, and living rural makes it even worse, I started doing my own research because life was really hard. It was really scary. It was really lonely. I was on my own, trying to figure out how do I live now? Like, what am I supposed to do? What is my life just done?
Right.
So through my research, then I found, like Dementia Alliance International, which really was the key to turning things around for me.
And I want you to tell us a little bit more about that organization. It's DIA, which is Dementia Alliance International.
Yes.
I'm going to put that up on the screen too.
And,
so tell us a little more about that.
So Dementia Alliance International is run of, for, and by people living with dementia. It is in 49 countries now. We run support groups. We run what we call a brain health hub. We run cafes, online cafes. And really we learn from each other. So, I remember the first time I joined one of their support groups, and I was terrified to join because I thought one side of me was thinking, well, this is admitting that this is really it then, right? This is having to accept to myself, yes, I have dementia. The other side of it was, what will these people think of me? But when I signed in, I found this group of people who looked just like me staring back at me. And they were so welcoming and they were so kind. And by the end of it, I had laughed and I had cried and I had finally felt like it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I can do this. So, and through them, I then found my voice for advocating and started doing a lot of advocating, started reaching out to a lot of other people who have dementia and, finding out how lost people really feel and how important that connection is. So I think to them, I always tell them they gave me my life back because they gave me hope and purpose.
You found your tribe.
Yes, I found my tribe. And there is nothing greater. And it's so unique because you're sitting amongst peers. You're not being facilitated by anyone except each other. So it's very safe and it's very comfortable. And we do incredible work advocating, on a global stage. And it's important because that's how changes get made. So, to have people joining us and lending their voice to such a great cause, to getting those changes that we so badly need from getting these resource tools kits built, and changing how the medical education is handed out, from whether it's for doctors or nurses or care staff or whatever the level, so that dementia is included and that it's a proper program that they're given, can really make the difference. So that's really important work that's being done.
I think it's amazing work that's being done. And I came across Dementia Alliance International about a year ago. I think you and I were talking earlier about that.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I had not heard about it. I didn't know. And I've been in this industry for a while, but I didn't know that this existed. So it's wonderful to know that. I think it could be such help to so many people, especially really young people like yourself that are diagnosed, that are sitting there going, wait a minute, I am not ready to just give up my life. I've got a lot more living to do, and I need a group of people that can support me in that and help me figure out next steps and where to go from here. So I've always been a big advocate of support groups when you have any kind of diagnosis. I think families of people with dementia, it's helpful to go to support groups, whatever your situation. If you have cancer, it's always helpful to get the perspective of other people who are going through the same thing that you're going through. They're experiencing it. They're not the clinician. They're not trying to fix you.
Yeah, they accept you. And that's one thing I always say, there's some great organizations out there that do a fabulous job doing support groups for the caregivers. They do a tremendous service and amount of work. DAI is unique in that it is of, for, and by. So it is a very safe place for the person living with, and we have members in their 30s and in their 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So we cross all those ages and the stages, and everybody helps everybody. And you meet people from around the world. So you really learn how it impacts all of us in such unique ways, our individual dementias, but similarly at the same time. And it really helps you sort of be able to settle and re-evolve into a new life living with your dementia.
Yeah.
Instead of living in fear of it, you live with it.
And you live with gratitude, don't you?
And
that kind of brings me up to, we mentioned earlier, Christine just wrote a book called For This I Am Grateful. Show us your book, Living with Dementia. This is what it looks like. Move it over a little bit. There you go. Perfect. Okay. For this, I am grateful. A little bit more this way, Christine.
It's going backwards.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard to figure out which way do you go on the screen because you're looking at yourself and you want to go the opposite way. I always go to fix my hair and I fix the wrong side. For this, I am grateful. Living with Dementia. You can find it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, bookstores. Anywhere where you buy books, you can probably get this book, right, Christine?
Yep. If you just, if you don't see it, they'll bring it in for you.
Okay, great. So I'm so glad that you have taken the time to write that book. I think it's going to reach a lot of people. Not everybody is connected online yet. It's getting more and more so. More people are getting comfortable. That's, a blessing that coronavirus gave us. You have to look for the blessings in everything, I think.
Yeah. And that's really the basis of my book. Was it really, I had to learn to have a different life. My life is not anything what it was before. And it is constantly changing because my dementia keeps progressing. So I'm always reinventing myself, so to speak. And it's about finding those silver linings in all of those things and being grateful for them. And like the coronavirus, there is, as devastating as it is, there is good that will come out of it, and that is surfacing. So, and dementia is the same way, and it's about learning to live in that gratitude.
I think that is the key with anything we deal with in life, is learning to live in that gratitude.
Yeah,
Christina, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This has been awesome. And for all of you listening, I think you need to order this book, For This I'm Grateful, Living with Dementia. Follow Christine. Christine, is there any links that we want to put up here that people should go to?
My Facebook or my WordPress, which links to my Facebook, is called chrissysjourney.com.
Is it CHR?
Yeah, CHRISSY.com. And that's both on Facebook and my WordPress site, where I write a regular blog.
You tell me if this is correct.
Yes.
Oops, no, I didn't spell that right. I can tell that right now. Let's fix that. JOUR. That's why I always ask. Okay, is that correct now?
That's it, yes.
Okay, all right. So this is where you can get more information about Chrissy's journey and follow her and get the help that you need.
Yep. And you can also find me through DAI, of course, and that's DAI.org.
And I'm going to put that up to DAI.org. DAI.org. Okay, great. All right. This has been so helpful. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was fabulous.
We really appreciate it. And we'll be talking with you, I know, in the future.
Yes, thank you. I look forward to it. And take care and have a safe and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Life After 50 show, helping you navigate the second half of your life. Today's show is sponsored by